until it starts. All right. So then we started talking about the political and social climate just a little bit. Are we going to go? Maybe not. There it goes. Okay. So we talked about some of like what London was like and how nasty it was and how it smelled from over 50 miles away. How people were throwing feces and all of their human waste into the street. How they threw all of their other waste into the River Thames. Yeah, so great. But they didn't have like dumps back then, right? There wasn't a way to take care of this stuff. So obviously we've had to come that far to come up with something. So now we're going to talk about some of the complications going on with the people in power. Do you guys know anything about England and Scotland in the Elizabethan era? What did I tell you?
England was trying to make Scotland theirs.
Yeah.
And then when Elizabeth I first died, she appointed James.
Mm-hmm.
What was it, like the seventh or something?
James the sixth.
Scotland.
Uh-huh. Absolutely. So we've got, this is also, you guys have heard of the Elizabethan era? Have we ever heard that phrase? Renaissance, you've heard of Renaissance, right? Yeah. Those two periods kind of overlap. So it's called the Elizabethan era because Queen Elizabeth was in charge. That was when she was ruling. Okay, so as it came to the end of that, England had been trying to absorb Scotland for a long time, making it part of England, and Scotland was like, oh heck no, we won't go. So this was likely a ploy, but there's a lot of controversy between them. There's full like differences of religions to the point that both queens, like Queen Mary of Scotland and Queen Elizabeth of England, have both been persecuting people of the opposite religion, right? Did I tell you about that at all?
No.
Okay, there's a big clash between the Catholics and the Protestants. So I'll come back to that, but just so you know, there's a huge divide between these two countries, okay? So he ends up on the throne, appointed by, I'll come back to this in a second, but appointed by the same woman who ordered the execution of his mother. He is now made king of that country. Okay? Kind of crazy. So we're kind of looking at whether or not Macbeth contains echoes of King James' interest, and I want you to kind of keep that in mind when we talk about King James's interest. I'm sorry, did you need that? I can go back. So the Elizabethan era definitely saw an interest in classical antiquity. So they're looking at like the classical stories, Greek myths, that kind of stuff. There's a rise in what we call humanist philosophy. That means a belief in the self-worth, individual dignity, not just the dignity of the larger group. There's radical changes in ideas about religion, politics, and science. So there's a lot of changes. You guys are probably familiar with that when we say Renaissance, right? Yeah.
So I kind of had a little bit of a question. So, I know you said James VI became James first of England.
Oh, how does that work?
Is that just like the number of generations that like have ruled over that specific place?
It is so apparently it was or what the practice was when you were appointed, and I think this was part of the religious piece when you were appointed the king of that country. In the rituals, you would take a different name. Right? So you might have grown up as Alexander, but when you are appointed to be king of that country, you would choose a different name. Right? So I'm sure there were a few that chose their own names, but a lot of them would go back to like names of previous kings that they felt that that would, carry some kind of value for them. So when he selected his name, since he just stuck with James, right? So he was the sixth James that had sat on a throne of Scotland. but the first James to sit on the throne of England. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it is kind of a weird, it's weird to us because we don't even have a monarchy, right? So
just because they have the same name doesn't mean they're actually like related.
yeah, that is the same person.
But I mean, like, you said like that was like the sixth James.
Oh,
sitting
yeah.
on that
Well, they would have been related in some way.
They're different thrones, though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
throne. Okay.
yeah. Okay,
it's understandable.
right. It is interesting now. Okay, we ready for the next one? All right. So, like I mentioned, there's a big question between the Catholic Protestant. So, anybody know the history? Anybody seen the play Six? Yeah, I knew at least one of you had. It's about the 6 wives of who?
Henry.
King Henry VIII. Okay, King Henry had 6 wives. That's what he's famous for, right? He had actually dismantled the Catholic Church 70 years before this point. Okay, he'd kind of taken it apart, mostly, as the story goes, because he wanted to divorce his wife, and the Catholic Church did not allow for that. And the Catholic Church had a lot of power over the monarchy, and how that stuff functioned. And so he was like, yeah, no. And he kind of developed his own, it was called Anglican, and it was very similar to Catholicism, but you could get a divorce, okay? So he'd totally taken it apart, kind of restructured it, and then there was some persecution by the time we get to, I can't remember if he did or if it was just Elizabeth, but Queen Mary of Scotland, also known as Bloody Mary, persecuted Christians, Protestants, Anglicans, whatever. So much so, put them to death, so much so that she was nicknamed Bloody Mary. Okay? Queen Elizabeth had done the same, right? So she remained Protestant because her father was. She did the same, but to a lesser extent. It wasn't quite so violent. But this is also, she's the reason that there's what they call priest holes and priest tunnels in England. Okay, so if you ever go and visit, hopefully you'll have that opportunity sometime in your life. It's kind of neat. The older estates and houses have priest tunnels so that priests could be smuggled in to do confession, to do communion, to do any other kind of rites and sacraments, and that kind of stuff. Okay, so, but Scotland was still Catholic. So here, when England hears that they're getting a king of what is currently a Catholic country, they're thinking, oh my goodness, is he gonna switch us back, right? Are we gonna be allowed to be openly Catholic, or is it gonna be a problem? So they're really, really hoping that he's gonna revive the Catholic faith in England. He decides not to. I don't know if religion can be messy, so he didn't want to mess with it, whatever. He was adamant, I am not gonna do it. I'm not touching this, okay? So there's some tensions, right? There's a lot of people that are upset. Why aren't we doing this? Why isn't this gonna take place? So there's a scheme that's hatched to try to push this problem, to make it seen as the problem that the people feel that it is. Okay, have any of you heard of the Gunpowder Plot of 1605? Do you need me to go back, or are you good? Okay, Gunpowder Plot of 1605. Anybody ever seen V for Vendetta? No? Gosh, guys, you need to watch more movies. Just kidding.
Alright, turn it off.
We can watch it in here.
No, but it's easy to get a hold of. So the Gunpowder Plot of 1605. So remember I told you they're really kind of upset about this whole not going back. And if you're religious, you probably know that that's a very personal kind of thing. And when that's threatened, that can become a really touchy issue. So the Gunpowder Plot of 1605 is a failed assassination attempt against King James. A group of men led by Robert Catesby had planned to kill King James and his queen at the state opening of Parliament on November 5th, 1605. The plot was uncovered almost at the last second because one of the conspirators warned his brother not to go to the House of Commons that day. And his brother told security. Okay, so security does a search of the place. This would have been, don't we have a parliament? I should probably be careful before. We have a House of Representatives, right? And Congress. House of Representatives, and what's the other side? Okay. So it would be that, where like the decisions are made, where votes are made and stuff like that, and the king was supposed to be there that day. So soldiers forced their way into the cellar of the House of Commons and found Guy Fawkes sitting there ready to light the fuse on 20 barrels of gunpowder. 20 barrels of gunpowder. It would have blown the place sky high. Fawkes was a Catholic, and because of this issue with the church, he was ready to push this idea, and several people up to kind of the top of the list. There's I don't know if it's a song or just a recitation. Remember the 5th of November of gunpowder plot and treason. It goes on. That's the only line I can remember. But this is how we celebrate the independence of our country. They celebrate the failed attempt of someone trying to destroy theirs. So this is still November 5th in England. They celebrate Guy Fawkes Day. They build what they call effigies of him. Anybody know what an effigy is? Yeah, it's like a representation of a person, right? So they build representations of Guy Fawkes and burn him at the stake. Okay, so traitors were sentenced to death, but before they made it that far, they were tortured. Guy Fawkes was tortured to find out who his co-conspirators were. So there are several references, and I'm giving you this up front because otherwise you're not going to see these. And I don't want to stop and explain what the gunpowder plot was in the middle of Shakespeare. Okay, so there are some people that think maybe it's rebellious. Given the rest of the information, I'll let you decide what you think. And don't worry, you don't have to write for the next couple slides. All right. Ready? Okay. Yeah. So torture was often used under King James I. This is an image that they still have the document, the confession of Guy Fawkes. They think, though, that it was written by someone else and that he was forced to sign it after being tortured. This is a torture rack in the Tower of London. Anybody guess what it does? It pulls your body apart. Yeah. Yep. So they torture him to find out the names of the other people involved. This is a printing. I think this is the one that may have been in the, if you were to have got a Bible from that time period. Now, mind you, most people couldn't read, so only a few people would have had one. That this was actually in the first several pages of the Bible. Oh, also, by the way, those of you who are religious, if you've ever heard of the King James version of the Bible, that's this guy. That's this King James. Had that translation done, yeah. Okay, so the impact of Fawkes. Those conspirators are captured. They're tortured. The king has to show people that it is not okay to try to blow up the king. Guys, that's a no-no. We don't do that. Okay, so they're executed in what's considered a very terrible show of strength, right? To show that is not something that you do. Do not try to come against the king. His co-conspirators, he did give way, his co-conspirators, and they were captured too, and they were also executed. I don't know what this does. So can you imagine, after seeing these people in public executions, how do you think the city's feeling right now? Absolutely, yeah. Terrified. They don't know. He's a new king. They don't really know kind of how he rolls yet. And he's making a statement, right, early on. Whoops, my bad. Let me go back. Go back. Okay. Now, of course, Shakespeare didn't have anything to do with this, but an old friend of his father's was implicated and was executed. Okay, so it does hit kind of close to home for him. All right, so I'll give you another one that you don't have to really write on. This is another image that was printed. I don't remember if this one was in a newspaper, but it is a print version of the members of the Gunpowder Plot being hanged, being drawn and quartered. You guys know what it means to be drawn and quartered?
No.
It is an old form of execution, super painful one. They tie each of your appendages to a different horse and then send them off in different directions, and it literally pulls the body apart. Interestingly, oh, it's not Rob Roy. Who is it? There's another famous Scottish person who'd fought for the Scottish to try to keep Scotland away from England, and England had him drawn and quartered. I can't remember his name, and they hung his arm in the middle of the city as a warning to the Scotsmen to not. They probably had that somewhere else. If they found it, it might have been what they found. Yeah. About.
I remember talking about this in Mexico, and I think that's why Spain has really bad relations with England.
Oh yeah.
I think with that, Spain is really Catholic of those times, so it's understandable why
Well-
they are looking like enemies.
Yeah. Well, and everything was like, if you really want to discourage somebody from doing something, you make it painful enough that they won't do it again, right? So this is, I can't remember if it was this time period too. I think it was. If you were caught stealing, you would lose a hand.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Okay. All right. So King James I is kind of an interesting guy. He's described as full of tics and weirdness. So just kind of odd little idiosyncrasies, things that, I don't know, are a little bit off. Maybe he was just socially awkward. I don't know. Right? But I'll tell you a little bit about him, and you can determine if he had reason for being a little bit weird. His father was killed by an assassin. Okay, so that, first of all, is already a little bit odd. Father's killed by an assassin. His mother was Mary, Queen of Scots. She was executed under the orders of Elizabeth I. Same woman just put him on the throne of England. Okay? So yeah, so there go both parents. Both in not really usual circumstances. So he's paranoid about his safety. And actually, I don't even have it on this slide, but he's had at least one failed assassination attempt against him before he ever takes the throne in England. Right? He's also had several warnings before he was crowned King of Scotland. He'd had some warnings from, I'll tell you who in a minute, about taking the throne, like people that were trying to prevent him from taking the throne. So yeah, he's paranoid about his safety. He sees like potential harm probably in everybody around him. That makes him everybody else, right? You're gonna be a little jumpy around somebody who suspects everybody, right? Someone who's that paranoid, especially when he's got enough power to order your execution, right? So, yeah, he's a little weird. But he's also a product of his circumstances. So Shakespeare's acting company. So Shakespeare, we're picking him up in the mid to late career, okay? He has already not only earned his status as a playwright, he has actually been successful enough to have his own theater built, right? I told you about the Globe, okay? So he did that. He has his own theater troupe. and Queen Elizabeth was one of his patrons. Okay, that doesn't just mean that she attended. In this time period, anybody familiar with how artist stuff worked in the Renaissance time period? Okay, so if you're not actually doing manual labor and producing something that will earn a wage that you can sell for money to get food, then you're not gonna live, right? Well, if you're an artist, how do you do paint, like buy your paint or get hold of your paint, your canvases, that kind of stuff? Yeah, I mean, you'd make it maybe, or do it on the side, I don't know. So they would have patrons. They would have people who were wealthy enough to essentially pay your rent and pay your food so that you could create art. Okay? So that's what Shakespeare's got going by the Queen of England. Okay? So that meant that she could also say, I would like you to, I want to play. Bring your guys down and put on a play. Now, often she would actually go to the theater to see plays too, but they were the exclusive, the only acting company that performed in front of the Queen. Nobody else did. Yeah, so there's a little, he's got a little bit of bragging rights there. So Shakespeare's men, of course they would like to secure, because now that she's gone, they just lost that patronage, right? They lost the money that keeps the wheels turning. Of course they're going to want King James to be their patron too. They probably would have had other patrons, and by this point they've got enough patronage of people just paying the money to show up to see the play that they can kind of keep things rolling. Yeah, well, they still need the patronage, but it does at least keep some of the bills paid, right? Because they have to pay for the theater now too, and they have to pay the actors, so that's where a lot of that other money would go. So they do eventually become the King's Men, but this is technically prior to being called the King's Men. So they decide that they're going to stage a play. They're going to try to quell some of these tensions, try to lighten it up a little bit, and portray James in a positive light, right? That will help the people see him in a good way. That will help him feel a little more secure in this position and that kind of thing. And so they write the Tragedy of Gowrie. Now, as far as I understand, this was not really written by Shakespeare, just one of the men in the group, okay? It's likely they would have had several playwrights, not just one. It told the story of an unsuccessful assassination attempt against King James when he was King of Scotland. It no longer exists. It did not go over well. He was not happy. It was not a good thing. They were in a position to try to, I don't know, but they felt like they needed to fix it. In fact, he was so angry that he reintroduced Elizabeth's old law that plays could not include modern political or religious storylines. Yeah, he was like, no, And to make sure this doesn't happen again. Now, this was Elizabeth's old law, so do you think Shakespeare is familiar with writing under these kinds of constraints?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so it just means that he has to do this again. Okay, so yeah, they messed up. Do we still need this? Yeah, some of you are still ready. Okay. There you go. Here's that law. Okay, plays could not include modern, political, or religious storylines. Modern, political, or religious storylines. So the King's Men are now in a position where they've pissed off the king. Do you think they want to stay in that position? No. So they go to their number one guy and beg Shakespeare to help them get out of this situation. Okay? They're hoping that he'll come up with a play that James would appreciate. They've already agreed on the date. They're going to perform at Hampton Court, so they're going to perform in the king's, I don't know.
Like private.
Yeah, like personally, like in a large room or whatever. So it's not, yeah, he's not coming to see them on stage. They're going to him. And they've already got all like the reservations made. Everything's ready to go. Now they just needed a play because they botched the last one. Okay, so they go to Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote Macbeth in 10 days. 10 days.
Is that a lot or a little?
That's a little. That's a little.
That's like very talented.
He wrote Macbeth in 10 days. Now remember, the goal is to get back on Henry's good side, or King James. I don't know why I got Henry. Get back on King James's good side, right? Because they're already kind of in a pickle. So, if you're trying to get back on the dude's good side, how are you gonna keep him interested? How are you gonna appeal to him?
Macbeth.
Macbeth. There you go. Maybe look for some of his interests. Find out things that he likes so that he's like, oh, hey, if he's into horror movies, you'd be like, it's got to be a horror film then, I guess. Right? Well, James wasn't into horror movies, but he was fascinated with witchcraft. He was fascinated with witchcraft. In fact, he wrote a book called Demonology, which has to do with the ways in which supernatural forces are trying to threaten his rule. Okay, so he specifically chooses to include these elements in the play that he knew would fascinate King James. Let's see, he wrote Demonology in 1597 while he was King of Scotland, after there had been terrible purges and countless women tortured and forced to admit to being witches, which he supervised himself. Right? So he was present at these. It wasn't just like, yeah, it's happening on the other side of the kingdom. No, he was involved. Now, when I share with you some of the stories and his encounters and experiences, it might help you understand why he was involved. But he was. I'll tell you about Agnes Thompson in a minute. Yeah, you don't have to put her. We'll come back to her, so. All right. What kind of ideas and associations do we have with witches? Ugly, okay.
Riding brooms.
Big nose, broom riding, that pointy hat.
Black cats.
War.
Green.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure where the green part came from, like where it originated. Warts, yeah, because they're
Oh, yeah.
super ugly. What else?
Cauldron.
The cauldron, yes.
Cauldron.
We need the cauldron.
Maybe like a hut in the middle of a swamp or something.
Okay, so like,
Knowledge?
well, I was thinking of the setting,
Cottage.
the cottage.
Swamp.
Minecraft.
Witch's hut.
Okay, and what?
Candy house.
When they see demons?
Okay, yeah, they're associated with demons.
Witchcraft.
And witchcraft, yeah. Okay. What else?
Weakness of
And
water.
black cat.
The what?
Weakness of water.
Okay.
I don't.
What do you mean by that?
Like,
They
it's
Oh,
touch
Wizard
water,
of Oz.
they dissolve.
Wizard of Oz.
like, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, like odd weaknesses. Oh, why do you think they use that in there? The weakness, like being that water is what melts her.
Demons, fire.
Maybe. Okay.
Because of isn't like in the witch trials they like see if they would drown or something. Or
That's
Float.
kind of what I was thinking, but the other one, I don't know. I think they toyed with some of those things to come up with that. Yeah. What about,
magic.
yeah, okay.
Spellbook.
Magic.
Pointy hat.
We got
that.
Oh,
We
yeah.
got
What
that.
else? There we go.
What about the ingredients that go into the cauldron?
It's like body parts.
Yeah. Yeah, body parts, blood.
Grayson.
Grayson?
Hayden's hair.
Well, I don't know. That doesn't cost enough.
Yeah. I can get you some.
Rose.
It would be like, oh, you guys, I cannot wait till you get to hear what they put in their cauldron. It is so nasty. Okay.
Rose.
Robes?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah, kind of like
Okay.
Like their attire.
Okay. When what about fog? Oh, a cat?
I already did black.
I've been saying that.
Say it louder.
Scream it, Grayson.
Dark cats.
I will make sure to yell then.
Uh-huh, especially dark, yeah, black cats. Mm-hmm. Potions.
The potions are really thinking that's more modern.
Fog.
Fog, yeah. Fog is associated. There's also, oh, what time, anybody know of any, like, numbers or times that are associated with witches?
8:13.
666 is devil, huh?
Yeah, but it can be,
Put it in the
have you guys ever heard of,
Demons.
witching hour?
No.
I've heard it.
Do you know when witching hour is?
4 o'clock.
3 a.m.?
It's 3
3
a.m.
to 3:30.
3 a.m. is witching hour. Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that like?
And I wake up with that.
I know, just a wealth of knowledge. Yeah, okay, huh,
Wasn't the witching hour
Parker has
reference to
one.
like
Parker has one.
or something?
maybe, it's,
Some roll doll look.
it is a common, what? No? Okay. So, oh wait, did I, okay. No, I finished that one, making sure I didn't miss my stories. Okay, yeah, here you go, here's an old idea of witches. Notice they all have some kind of animal. They're all old.
Broomstick.
Yeah. Okay. Modern associations with witches. Green, pointy hats, ugly, big nose, warts,
Lazy eye.
And all
lazy eye. This one's a little bit interesting because she's not actually
are witchy.
ugly, but she has literal horns, like demon horns. And her name? Maleficent. What does Mal mean? Bad or evil. It literally, her name literally translates to full of bad or full of evil. Yeah. Great.
Crow.
Great. Mm-hmm. All right. What time is it? 51. Hey, I got 2 minutes. Long enough to tell you the story. Okay, here's Agnes Thompson. So one of the accused women said at her trial on Halloween night in 1590 that the devil himself came to their church to focus his malice directly on the greatest enemy he had in the mortal world, King James of Scotland. Don't you think if someone says that about you that you're going to be like, what is this madness? Like, what's going on here? And how come I'm the focus of your deal, right? So he's got a couple stories that are kind of like that. So, of course, there's witches in Macbeth. So these are the Weird Sisters. I know they're kind of hard to see. I think my light's going out. Anybody know what the Weird Sisters are? Have we ever heard of this?
I've heard of it. I stopped.
Ah, okay. It's spelled like this.
W-Y-R-D.
Uh-huh.
Weird. Because it's weird.
And it translates to fates. And there's 3 of them.
Oh, like that.
Okay? So I don't know that any of the early transcripts ever actually call them witches. They're just presented like witches. The ones that we read now definitely say, although I think they say like Weird Sister 1 or something. But yeah, so there's a little bit of toying between the witchcraft and also this fatalistic. Anybody know about the 3 fates in mythology? Okay. What are they? Are they good, bad,
I mean,
in between?
depends.
Yeah, they don't really pick a side. They kind of play both sides. Yeah, keep that in.
They're their own.
They're what?
They just cut the rope.
Mm-hmm.
They cut the yarns that symbolize your
Yep.
life.
All right, guys, have a good day.